All right, what is going on, everyone? It is Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Lair to provide you my very deep and insightful thoughts on the last two episodes of Loki and really just kind of reflect on the series as a whole. I enjoyed the series. The final episode was very fucking interesting, right? Like I've said in my last review, it was clear that we were being sort of misled by having WandaVision be the thing that's supposed to sort of open us up to like a multiversal element to, the phase that's coming up, phase 4. That I guess the phase we're in for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it turned out to be fucking Loki. Of course, Loki is the place where the multiverse is established. And it was very clear at the very end that there was one timeline up until the moment that Loki changed shit. And at the moment that Loki meaning Sylvie at this point, right? But ultimately, Loki from New York, 2012, needed to be involved in order for all this to play out. So that he definitely played a role, and ultimately, it's the Avengers that caused time travel to begin with, which led to him, becoming a variant, etc., etc. So it was the Avengers, but then it was Thanos that really led the Avengers to have to do what they did. So, it's always Thanos. It's fucking Thanos' fault. It's always fucking Thanos' fault. And I think I'm very comfortable with that because Thanos is the ultimate badass fucking villain. And for him to be responsible for all of this mayhem, fantastic. So fucking Kang, huh? So I'm not a Kang person. Like I read X-Men comics and I read Spider-Man. And then I read the crossover, so I read like the Infinity Gauntlet during like the 90s and shit. But I never delved too deeply into the Avengers world and the Fantastic Four world, and Kang is more closely connected to that. But I do understand who and what Kang is. I understand that he's a threat and he's a major villain. And I really like the idea that this man who is like I think, did he say it was like from the 23rd century or something? Who's a scientist. He discovers how to interdimensionally travel, right? And then that allows him to start interacting with other versions of himself, and some of them are assholes. And then that leads to timelines warring against other timelines led by him, Kang. And then that ultimately led to this version of Kang who like ended the multiversal war and sort of developed the TVA to stop any branches from happening. And he himself, excuse me, did not appear to be, my burps brought to you on behalf of LaCroix. This is the mango flavor. If you like sparkling water that tastes like something that isn't sparkling water, let me tell you about LaCroix. Mango, nice and chilled. Very, very nice. Very nice. Anyway. So he developed the TVA. He built it out to have there only be one timeline, right? And by the way, I really like that opening sort of sequence where even the Marvel logo was cut to sort of like all these different moments from the MCU, and you're thinking, okay, like they're really celebrating the MCU. They're kind of like really ensconcing this show in the MCU, kind of the deep matter of the MCU, and then it becomes clear. Oh no, this is ultimately, like, you understand. Oh no, these are all moments within this timeline that appears circular, like visually, around this like weird castle in the middle of the end of time or whatever, and that is the one timeline. And so these are all moments within that. And so the idea is that if Kang is killed, then all the timelines start to occur. And so no matter where they started to branch out, what's important is that there will be different versions of Kang. If this guy does not exist and the TVA does not work the way it's supposed to, there will be different versions of Kang. And that happened the minute Sylvie killed him, right? So therefore now you have... Because in this moment of like them existing at the end of time, all time has already happened. And therefore, if he is killed, then all those branches exist, and therefore all the different versions of Kang exist, and therefore they've already warred, and therefore, ultimately leading to what we saw at the very end, which was like Loki back in the Time Variance Authority, and you saw a statue of like actual Kang the Conqueror, right? Like this sort of like kind of metropolis, like dystopic sort of authoritarian figure who is like the ruler, and it was Kang. And that made me really happy because I like how they went about sort of creating the lore for Kang and then kind of allowing that to happen, and ultimately it, I guess, will reverberate throughout the Marvel universe. But it's just, I think it's powerful enough, you know, that it resonates really well, and I just really enjoyed it. Now I'm forgetting the name of the actor for some fucking reason, slipping my mind, but the guy that played Kang, he was in Lovecraft Country, which was super fucking wild. I highly recommend watching if you're a horror fan. It's a really interesting concept because it's episodic in that the episodes are kind of self-contained stories in a sense. It's more like episodic in genre because I feel like each episode is kind of its own genre in a sense. And then there is like a serialized sort of backbone to the whole thing. And it can be a little jarring at first because you're like, wait a minute. Like things all of a sudden change, rules change, or in like weird fucking places that you never thought you'd fucking go with the show. But it just covers so much, and it does it in such a wild way and in such a graceful way. And like they just released the Emmy nominations, and it was nominated for like 18 awards or something, because there's something really special about that show. And ultimately, Misha Green, I believe is her name, who is responsible for it. They did not get a second season, but she has been hired, I believe, to, is it do Captain Marvel 2? Something. And so, like, she clearly is talented, and Marvel knows it. They hired both the dude that played Kang and the chick that played the Time Variance cop, who ultimately brings down Ravonna. Is that her name? The head, who like takes the soldiers to the point in time where she was just a normal teacher before she became the variant that she is ultimately. She was also from Lovecraft Country, so there are some really clear ties here to Lovecraft Country. And the dude that played Kang, he's been nominated for a Best Actor Emmy, which is a big fucking deal. And the dude deserves it. He did a really good job in Lovecraft Country. He's a great fucking actor. And by the way, he's incredibly fucking hot. Like, just this beautiful man. Like, they showed him quite a bit of him. He was like naked and half naked quite a bit throughout that show, which I very much appreciate as a gay man. And so like, I'm very happy about that. But anyway, beyond like that presence and like that sculpted physique and his overall good looks, the guy can fucking act. Like, the motherfucker can act, and he sold me this like quirky, offbeat but serious Kang character who was like this weird fucking motherfucker who'd gone through some crazy shit and lives in this weird fucking place, this weird point in time that is not fucking real, really, because it's like this arbitrarily kind of theoretical place that exists that shouldn't exist, but it does. But it's like what happens to you in a place like that if you're there for a long period of time? I mean, you gotta assume you start fucking going a little bit woohoo, and he did, and I enjoyed his performance. But like the whole time, I was like wanting like more Kang, you know, a little bit more of that fucking, I'm fucking Kang, I'm in charge here, I'm gonna get you. And then the minute Sylvie killed him, it became clear, oh shit, we're gonna get that Kang. Like, Sylvie causes this. So the show needed to cause this in order to create the actual Kang, the Kang that will be the threat. He's going to be in Ant-Man Quantumania, apparently, as the villain. So we know that's coming. We know we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and now there is a multiverse. So because we were at the end of time when that sort of web of timelines happened and ultimately became the sphere around that castle, that means that every possibility exists. That means that the gloves are off. Now that's going to bring in every version of Marvel characters we've ever seen. And then there's got to be something where, like a Crisis on Infinite Earths type of thing, where all the realities are merged into one. And all the stuff that we like from all the different incarnations of Marvel characters that aren't MCU, I think will be brought in to the MCU. And that will explain a lot. And again, I was thinking we were going to get that from WandaVision, but we did not. But it sort of implied it would happen in Doctor Strange. But it appears as though this show, is what ultimately directly links to Doctor Strange. But you got to assume that whatever Loki did already had happened in WandaVision. And therefore, I have to assume that Pietro was pulled out of an alternate dimension, that it did exist. Versus like this made-up creature. Like, I feel like this multiverse already existed by that point. And therefore, that faux Pietro that we got was actually fucking Pietro. A version of Pietro. And therefore, Evan Peters can be Quicksilver in the MCU. So, and like when we saw J. Jonah Jameson in Far From Home, Spider-Man Far From Home, like, that's gotta have happened already as a result of what happened in the show. Right? Like, J. Jonah Jameson had to have been brought in. Maybe. I'm not going to try to figure it out. I was thinking that maybe that J. Jonah Jameson was brought in from an alternate dimension as well. But we never saw J. Jonah Jameson in the normal MCU dimension, so I can't say that for sure. But this does imply that there is a multiverse, because if you have the same actor playing that character, that means there could be different versions of the character that look like that actor. And therefore, there is a multiverse, and therefore, the Spider-Man films exist, right? And therefore, you can bring Tobey Maguire into Spider-Man Far From Home. No Way Home, which is the one coming up at the end of the year. So, it looks like this sort of established that sort of stepping stone to what is coming next that I think we were all kind of waiting for. And I think it did it beautifully. I really enjoyed these last two episodes. I didn't do a review last week again because I kind of felt like that episode was the first part of the last two episodes, because we're talking about the third act, right? Just like the second act, like the third and fourth episodes were the second act. And so here we have the last two episodes that encompass the third act, and you had the big set piece in the middle of the last one, right? When the Lokis have gone together. By the way, I liked all the Loki variant stuff. It was fun. And then finally they go fight that Gorgon or whatever it was. I forget what it's called, but like that purple cloud thing that eats like the remains of realities that get put into the end of time with all the variants. And then we have that great set piece where the older Loki, played by, what's his name? I forget what his name is. Richard something. He is fucking awesome, by the way. If you've never seen the movie Warlock, he's in that movie and he plays this great fucking character. I highly recommend watching that movie. In fact, he's very entertaining in that. Fuck. I almost had it. Anyway, so I'm terrible with fucking names. But, so he brought Asgard, that Asgard illusion, right? That like was really dope, and that was like a huge expensive fucking thing to do. So like we got all the big kind of set piece stuff in the second to last episode, and then we got, finally Sylvie and Loki enchanting this Gorgon thing. I think it's called Gorgon. I don't know. It's called the purple monster. And then that allows them to open up like the illusion to the entrance to wherever the puppet master is, right? Ultimately, we know that it's Kang. So these last two episodes are one thing, basically, in my mind. That's why I didn't want to kind of go into stuff last week, because there's not much to talk about beyond just like kind of, like fun elements that they brought in. I mean, they brought in that Thanos helicopter when I saw that shit, I thought it was so funny because I remember seeing it somewhere in, I think it was like, I think, I feel like Kevin Feige mentioned it at some point. Somebody mentioned it, and I know I saw it in some documentary where like they talked about like how cheesy Thanos had been represented in the past in comics, and they showed the helicopter, and I always thought that was so funny. And the fact that they brought it in, and like I think it was James Gunn who tweeted that he wanted to bring in the Thanos helicopter earlier, and then now he finally got to. So I'm going to assume that he's indirectly responsible for this, if at the very least just being the one to like kind of bring it up. I mean, so for those of you that don't know, I think it was a Marvel team up or something with Spider-Man, and then Thanos, he was fighting Thanos, and Thanos had like he was in a helicopter, and it said Thanos on there, which means that he had to have commissioned a private helicopter that he bought first of all, Thanos bought a helicopter, first of all. Okay. Second of all, he had it painted with his name on it. Not only was like, oh, great, I have a helicopter now. He was like, but it's missing something. It's missing my name painted on the side of it. Like, that's something that has to have happened, right? Anyway, hilarious to see the fucking, the helicopter there. Really, really enjoyed, like, all these little Easter eggs all over the place. All the various Lokis, all their interactions, super fun. The crocodile Loki, whatever, hilarious, funny, whatever. But ultimately, like, the thing that was most important was the relationship between Loki and Sylvie, and how Loki had sort of fallen in love with himself, and like they'd both learned to be better people by being themselves, sort of. They sort of are converging, but then at the end, it's like, no, we are different people. And then, you know, Loki obviously wants to accept the deal of him and her running the TVA and moving on, but she can't move on from her pain because she's had her whole life ripped from her. She's been running for her entire life. Like, that's different than just kind of being hurt by certain things that Loki ultimately could get over. But for Sylvie, like, we're talking about her whole life, and she could not get over it. And that's why she makes the decision to kill Kang. And I like that, you know, I really like that. I like that everything was a setup for that final moment. Like the whole show, you know, it's about like understanding, okay, so there's a decision to be made. Why is that decision important? Who are these people making the decision? How does this factor into what we already know about the characters? But then ultimately, we need this very pivotal plot thing to happen. And we want it to happen in the most resonant way possible, meaning that it's not just like some throwaway, like, oh, by the way, there's a multiverse now. It's like, no, there's a whole fucking story. Loki is trying to become better. There's a time variance authority. There's a mystery there. There's another Loki. There's more Lokis. Like, there's stuff going on. But ultimately, like, the reality is that the MCU needed the multiverse, and that's where it was heading, and that's where we got, and I really enjoy it. And I love the idea that Kang is now the big bad, and we're going to see him out and about. We might see him in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I think I heard somebody say something about that online today, that Loki was going to be in that, but I don't know, because that is sort of complicating things on a level that they may not want to, in terms of storytelling, because it appears as though there's going to be a second season of Loki, and you have to assume that whatever happens in Doctor Strange 2 will affect that, and this will affect Doctor Strange 2, and then, of course, there's a Spider-Man Far From Home, and there's, No Way Home, and so there's a lot of things to consider. Ultimately, I think this is the beginning of another great chapter for the MCU, and I'm really excited to find out what happens next. And that's it. Those are my thoughts on Loki. There's so much MCU stuff happening. We have the What If series coming up, I think, next month. I'll be talking about that one because I love What If. What If has always been a favorite thing of mine. It was always so jarring when I was a kid to read those comics, and because they were really dark. They were really fucking dark. Like, everybody ended up dying all the time. It was like horrible. It was like, here are the worst case scenarios for like 20 pages. There's like the first 10 pages is like, here's how you remember things happening, and here's how things change, and then here's the players, and then here's how everything goes horribly, and a bunch of people die. Everything's terrible and awful. And then the Watcher at the end's like, yes, that was one way things could have gone, but fortunately they did not, and blah, blah, blah. And then you move on with your life. But those comics, there was something special about them, because they were like these self-contained whole worlds. And now we're going to get that in this cartoon form. And the animation style, it looks fine, you know. And they have all the MCU actors there, which is really exciting. So I'm just really excited to see where it's going to go. I mean, there's just a lot of interesting stories that are being told. But I think even with the trailer, there are stories that have yet to be revealed to us. And so I think we're in store for some surprises, which is really exciting. And then, of course, after that, we have... Oh, by the way, Black Widow. I already threw up a video of Black Widow. So check that out if you haven't already. I did enjoy that movie as well. But we have Hawkeye, which will bring Elena from Black Widow into it. We've got Miss Marvel, which should then introduce the young Miss Marvel, which will then, with Monica Rambeau from WandaVision, join Miss Marvel in the Marvels, I believe it's what it's called. In Captain Marvel 2, it's called the Marvels. So we're going to have Captain Marvel, and then there's 2 other characters. And so we're moving. And then, of course, there's more stuff. There's Shang-Chi coming, I think, in a month or 2. Then we've got the Eternals, and then we've got Spider-Man Far From Home. And then we have Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is supposed to come out next year early, I believe. So it's rolling, kids. We're rolling through the MCU. There's other shows coming. She-Hulk is shooting. Yeah, it's just really exciting. I love it. I love this fucking shit. Kevin Feige cares. He hires great actors. He hires great everyone. Everyone is on top of their game when they're working on this stuff. It shows. This is a really another great show that is sort of this long movie that can be placed within sort of the continuity of this beautiful long story that's being told, that's building out the Marvel Universe in a way that we've never seen before. In a way that does sort of echo like the magic of what made that universe special to me and so many of us to begin with, which has held our imagination for our entire lives. And this is going to establish, you know, a whole new generation of people that are just like deep into this shit in a way that even maybe we weren't, you know. If they start to dive into the comics like this generation at some point and really get into like the lore and the characters and all the different stories that have been told throughout the decades, I mean, on top of growing up on these movies, like I think you're going to make even more passionate fans, if that's even possible. I think this thing is just going to keep snowballing, and I'm very happy about it. I don't think there's any problem with it. People, I know there's critiques of stuff out there, but it's like anytime things get popular enough, people are going to start criticizing it. When The Walking Dead became like one of the top-rated shows ever, people started talking shit about it because when you get the general audience involved, like not all their tastes are suited by something like that, you know, something genre driven. And so therefore they have to start turning against it because they feel like, well, this isn't as good as it's supposed to be. It's like, well, no, it actually is. But if you're not into that genre, then you're not going to like it. But if you are, this is like top-notch shit. And then, you know, Walking Dead, you had everybody getting into it. So everybody was like, all right, well, I'll watch The Walking Dead. But it's like, you're watching a zombie movie that's really fucking long. Zombie movies are bleak. Horrible things happen. Usually things are never happy. And that's The Walking fucking Dead. If you're down for that shit, great. If you're not, then don't get all up in it. But people do. And then there's a backlash. Same here. If you're not a superhero person, if you're not a comic book person, if you're not a sci-fi person, if you're not a horror, if you're not a genre person, like superhero films aren't going to suit your interests. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to get involved in some discussion about like, oh, well, this overall thing has this terrible meaning and it's bringing down film in general and all this stuff. It's like, well, it's just what it is. Like, that's all that it is. And either you enjoy it or you don't. Now, what it means as far as business and all that, that's like demand and supply, you know? Like, people like this shit. Like, so there's this clear backlash that's happened, but it's not pronounced enough because the love for this stuff is big enough that I think it can surmount it. And ultimately, it's about the quality, and the quality surmounts it as well. And therefore, that's all that matters. Loki was quality. WandaVision was quality. Falcon and the Winter Soldier was quality. And, you know, now we have movies once again, and things are going to keep rolling. And I'm very excited about it. I can't wait for more, and I'm looking forward to it. All right, folks. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for checking it out. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. Check out other stuff that I'm maybe talking about. Go back in my videos. Watch a bunch of other shit that I've been doing for I think 10 years now, or maybe more. Yeah. And I hope everybody's well. Take care of yourselves, and we will see each other again soon. And as always, I want to remind you that if you haven't already, you better put an X in that box because ain't nobody checking me. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.